Good evening. Good evening. I'm Jennifer Napier-Pierce, editor of the Salt Lake Tribune, honored to be invited to moderate this debate between Democratic candidates in Utah's 3rd Congressional District. We're streaming video on Facebook Live from the Rio Theater in beautiful downtown Helper. Great to have Mayor Chavez with us tonight. And tonight we're going to hear from 3 Democrats, Kathryn Allen, Ben Frank, and Carl Ingwell. Several of tonight's questions are drawn from those submitted by the Carbon County Democratic Party, and the debate portion will last 1 hour, followed by 30 minutes of questions from our live audience. The candidates have agreed to a format giving each 90 seconds for an initial reply to a question and 30 seconds for rebuttal. But before we get to questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. And in a coin toss just a few moments ago, we determined that Ben Frank would go first. So Ben, you have 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, everybody, for coming out on this beautiful night. I'm running for Congress in Utah's 3rd Congressional District because we're in a pivotal moment in Utah and in the United States. We can either continue down the path of corporatism, militarism, and corruption, or we can choose the path of freedom, equality, and greatness. For too long, the government hasn't represented the working class. Due to several Supreme Court decisions, our campaign finance system incentivizes corruption and devalues the needs of working families. The United States no longer has a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Rather, we have a government of the lobbyists, by the corporation, for the billionaire. Our campaign finance system is a system of legalized bribery. The government works for oil companies, pharmaceutical companies, weapons contractors, and Wall Street. Wall Street alone gave over $2 billion in campaigns in 2016. These are the reasons why I believe that the 3 most important words in the English language are campaign finance reform, and why I'm calling for a 28th constitutional amendment to end corporate personhood and ban corporate money from campaigns. We need fundamental change in Congress, and we need fundamental change in America and in Utah. In order to achieve this change, we need to elect leaders with a bold vision and specific plans to address the issues that millions of Americans face every day. We need leaders who will fight for higher wages and safer jobs. Leaders who understand mental health and addiction, who can implement treatment programs to fight the opioid epidemic and treat the root causes of crime. What this campaign is about is creating a government that represents real human beings and not corporations. This campaign is about fundamentally changing our political system. If elected, I will work day and night for working families in Utah. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kathryn Allen. Kathy, you have 2 minutes.
There's a lot I could tell you about my 40 years in healthcare, but this debate is about you. Imagine you're a 21-year-old college student and you have leukemia. You go through chemotherapy and you go into remission. Your healthcare saved your life. Unfortunately, 5 years later, you have Trump care. Now you have a pre-existing condition. Your choice is between medical bankruptcy and dying at age 26. Now suppose you're playing basketball at the ward in a pickup game and you suddenly lose consciousness. This is the first time you've ever known that you have a defective heart valve, despite your middle age status. Well, now you have a pre-existing condition under Trump care. No more new heart valve for you. Now suppose that you're a 60-year-old woman who's got diabetes and you've got 5 years left in Medicare. You've had your first heart attack. You try to get a Trump care policy, but it's so expensive you think, oh, I'll just go without and take my chances. Well, pretty soon you're falling behind on your prescriptions, your doctor follow-up visits, and your diabetes spirals out of control. You have your second heart attack, and that one's fatal. Trump care is cruel and inhumane. It is an abomination, and the American public deserves so much more. Whether we call it single payer or Medicare for all, we need to get something that encompasses all of us. America can do this. We are innovative. What it takes is the will of the people and the will of government. We're only halfway there. If you elect me, I will put the will of the people first. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Carl Ingwell, you have 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you. Greetings. So we are in a special election, and we're in a very unique position right now to gain momentum for the Democratic Party going into the midterm elections next year. To do so, we must send the best candidate forward, and I believe that I am that candidate. There are 3 things that set me apart. Number 1, I have the experience. As a long-time community organizer and environmental lobbyist, a person that has founded numerous community organizations, and a person that has sat on multiple governmental boards, I know how to listen and address the concerns of diverse voices. My experience in politics and community engagement sets me far apart from the other candidates. I don't just talk about issues. I actively work to find solutions for the issues. I've worked with a tremendous amount of stakeholders from every background and community, from local residents to government officials. We work together to reach bipartisan solutions for problems ranging from hunting safety along the Antelope Island Causeway to a bill in the state legislature that would allow Utah to enact air quality regulations stricter than the federal EPA. I've worked on helping improve our communities long before I filed to run for this seat, and I will continue to do so beyond the November election. Finally, I understand the importance of addressing these issues to meet the needs of all Utahns, not just those from larger urban areas. I'm a proud, lifelong Utahn, and for the last decade I've lived and worked all over Congressional District 3. I've met with residents from every background and have listened to hear their concerns. My lived experience and involvement throughout the district gives me a thorough understanding of the issues that impact the district as a whole, as well as the concerns that are unique to urban and rural areas. We have to work together to make sure that every Utahn can earn a living wage where they live, has affordable health care, and can enjoy Utah's remarkable public lands now and into the future. And I will work tirelessly to make sure that that happens. Let us flip the third. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to our first question. The Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. How do you interpret that? And Ben Frank will have our first response. You have 90 seconds.
So a part that also is in the Second Amendment says that for national security, we need to maintain a well-regulated militia. But how I interpret the Second Amendment as a whole is that we do have a right as American citizens and as law-abiding citizens to own firearms. However, with all the rights in the Bill of Rights, there's certain limitations. You know, freedom of speech is something that's very valuable, but of course you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. So the right to bear arms is valuable. Everybody has a right to own guns. However, if you've committed a felony, you've abused that right. Like if you're violent, we shouldn't trust you with that right. And so I support universal background checks as well as closing the Charleston loophole, which allows people to own guns if the background check doesn't come back for 3 days. And we saw tragic results with the Charleston loophole in South Carolina with the Dylan Roof case.
Thank you. Kathy Allen, 90 seconds.
Well, I don't want to take anybody's hunting weapons. I believe in background checks. I also think that technology can improve safety in guns. I would like to see guns locked up separately from ammunition, as is done in some countries that I've visited. I'm most concerned about the safety of children and innocent people. And I think there is too much gun violence in this country, and we certainly need to be careful whose hands they fall into. I personally can't see any reason for a citizen who likes to hunt to have an automatic weapon to kill many, many people. So that's my position. Hunt on.
And Carl Ingwell, 90 seconds.
Thank you. I am a gun owner myself. I believe that things like hunting and gun ownership are very important to Congressional District 3. I would not like to see any Second Amendment rights infringed on in either federally or within the district. And the one and only thing I can say about gun ownership is that I would like to see the gun show loophole closed, but other than that, I do not agree with infringing on people's right to bear arms.
30 seconds in rebuttal time. Ben Frank, you mentioned that you support universal background checks. What exactly does that mean?
That means closing the gun show loophole, and making it illegal for any transaction without a background check. And then, like I said, with the Charleston loophole, it doesn't matter how long that background check takes. We need to wait until you get it back before the weapon is sold.
Kathy Allen, you mentioned you support technological solutions to this problem. Can you expand on that?
Yes, I've read about ways to keep guns locked that are harder to get to if you're a child. And I would favor those kinds of solutions, as well as what I said about locking the ammunition up separately from the weapons, and certainly keeping them away from children.
And Carl, you are a gun owner, so I'm assuming that when you say you don't want any Second Amendment rights infringed, that doesn't include the gun show loophole.
I mean, that depends on how you interpret the Second Amendment, right? I believe that the Second Amendment can be read as looking at responsible gun ownership and responsible gun laws. We still have the right to go out and purchase guns at a gun store or at a gun show. Closing the gun show loophole would just require background checks at gun shows.
All right. Let's move on to our second question. House Republicans voted to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, but the Senate continues to hammer out its version of an Obamacare substitute. If elected, how would you approach health care reform? And in Kathy Allen's case, maybe expanding on your opening statement. You have 90 seconds, Kathy.
Well, it's hard to compress that into 90 seconds, but I would say that we need a full open process to debate this issue because it is indeed very complex. And I believe it needs providers, patients, ethicists, actuaries, and basically a think tank to carefully modulate these changes. And I certainly disagree with practically everything that I've heard about the AHCA. We don't want the children of our communities to be cut off from health care. And I don't know if most of you realize, but in all of the case of the 3rd Congressional District, the ones who would most be likely to lose health care with this, the Medicaid kids, 59% of them are children, and if you add disabled children to that category, it's 66%. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about kicking innocent children off of health care, and it's not being a transparent process. If you watched anything today, you saw just right before when we were eating dinner, we saw that Orrin Hatch maintains that lots of legislation is done behind closed doors, and he doesn't really want this aired out in the public. So I think that's completely the wrong approach, since the ACA took months and months and months, and many, many people input into it before it was finalized.
Carl Ingwell, 90 seconds.
So I'm going to start out actually with a personal story that I think is very problematic in healthcare in this country. A couple days ago, I had a kind of a sharp pain in my calf, and I realized that I needed to see someone about it. And one of the thoughts that went through my head is do I have the money to pay for this? So I started talking to some healthcare providers on the phone, and they told me that a pain in the calf can actually be a very not good thing. So I ended up going into the emergency room in Moab, finding out that I have blood clots in my calf. And one of the things that no one should ever have to ask is do I have the money to get the life-saving treatment that I need? I am very much for H.R. 676, the Expanded and Improved Medicare for All Act. I believe that a single-payer system is what we need to be going for in this country. Benefits of the single-payer system are no out-of-pocket payments, no deductibles, and we end the for-profit healthcare system. I think that healthcare should be looked at as a public good, just in the same way that we look at a fire department or a police department. I think that everyone should have access to healthcare.
Thank you. Ben Frank, 90 seconds.
So I've been on many angles of this healthcare debate. First, starting as a mental health professional. I've spent many years working in mental health and working with clients that required Medicaid, people with developmental disabilities. And what we consider the nitty-gritty details of funding actually does have a real-life impact on their lives. And when I worked at a psychiatric hospital, there was a very big difference. Like, it was a very classist-based system. They couldn't say it, but there was a very big difference to where your bed would be if you had good health care and where it would be if you had Medicaid. And as well as I have multiple sclerosis, and the medication that I am taking now would cost $5,000 a month without health insurance. And so I think that it's very important that we do acknowledge healthcare as a right, and that we do pick a system that's efficient and effective and covers everybody. And that is why, like Carl, I support H.R. 676. I am an advocate of Medicare for all, single payer.
You all seem to be in uniformity on this one. I guess my follow-up question, and a 30-second rebuttal from each would be, how would you work across the aisle with a Republican majority to solve the health care reform question? And Kathy Allen, you go first, 30 seconds.
I think that you have to listen with respect to people who disagree with you and truly try to understand their point of view before you can try to persuade. But sometimes what I tell people is, I think there's just this disconnect. Like, if we built a bridge in Connecticut with federal highway funds, nobody would object to that. No one objects to the VA veterans having benefits or old people having Medicare benefits. I don't get the disconnect. I think that we all deserve health care.
Time.
And it needs to be publicly paid for.
Thank you. Carl, you will go next. 30 seconds.
Thank you. So actually, I have worked across the aisle on a healthcare issue a couple of years ago. I lobbied for a bill in the Utah State Legislature that would allow patients with severe epilepsy and other disorders to be able to access CBD oil. And I worked with a number of legislators at the state capitol, and we came to a solution, and the bill was eventually passed to allow these patients to receive that treatment with a doctor's note.
Terrific, thank you. And Ben Frank, 30 seconds.
I would go work across the aisle by using the argument that Republicans love to make, is they love to be fiscal conservatives. And if you look at single payer versus a private insurance system, the overhead cost of like all of the bureaucrats and advertising and things for a single payer system is about 20%, where it's about 6% on a single payer system. I've calculated the numbers, and for my plan of how I would like to fund single payer, it would cost the average Utah family about $500 a year. And so we hit them with or persuade them with fiscal conservatism, and then in Congress.
Time.
Did you say time?
Yep, sorry. All right, let's go to our next question. And Carl, you will be the first to respond on this. This is a very hyper-local question. For decades, there's been an active debate over whether to build a dam about 9 miles east of Fairview. Supporters say the dam would give a needed boost to the local water supply, while regulators say the environmental impacts are unclear. So, where do you stand on the Gooseberry Dam project? Carl Ingwell, 90 seconds.
You know, unfortunately, I would love to answer this question, but I feel that I do not know enough about the proposal to answer the question and give it justice. What I would say about that is that in many cases of building things or anything that requires an environmental impact statement, I have worked on a lot of those issues in my time as an environmental organizer. I would be willing to reach out and listen to stakeholders on both sides of the issue and come to an informed decision. But unfortunately, right now, I have not come to that decision.
Okay, thank you. Ben Frank, you're next. 90 seconds.
I also am not super aware of what to do going forward about this particular issue. It seems like that's an issue that's going to be, like you said, hyper-local. Like the federal government is probably doesn't have complete control over that. And but generally, I like to stand with public lands, with the effect of the environment. But I would be listening to how it'll affect local constituents as well before coming to a decision if a bill were to ever be brought up that I would vote on.
And Kathryn Allen.
Well, I have to third the fact that I don't know very much about it either.
This was a question submitted by Carbon County Democrats, so.
To be honest, I thought this was a healthcare debate, so my bad. I think I would weigh the environmental impact with the economic impact, and of course, listen to all sides before I weighed in on it. And I don't know how much of it would be under federal control either. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I won't ask you a rebuttal on that one then. Let's move on. Let's see. We're back to Ben going first. To what extent do you believe the burning of fossil fuels, namely coal, contributes to climate change? And what do you suggest as a remedy? 90 seconds.
I think burning fossil fuels and human activity does have a large effect on climate change. And what we do as a remedy is what we should be doing anyway for economics. You know, here in Carbon County, we value our coal miners, who I really believe that coal miners are unsung American heroes. And the truth of the matter is that economics is what's taking coal away, not the federal government. What the federal government can do is invest in jobs training programs and ways to transition into clean energy. My goal, should I be in Congress, would be to push for having a society that operates entirely 100% on renewable energy by 2030. And one program that could very much benefit this area and other more rural areas in Utah is called the Wind for Schools program. That's through the Department of Energy, where the Department of Energy will come and they will give specialized training to the students of this school on how to build a wind turbine, how to operate it, and then the school will be energy independent, and they will sell excessive energy back to the energy companies to add more revenue for the school. And so there's countless innovative programs like that we can employ that will help bolster our economy, help revitalize the livelihoods for millions of people, and also protect the environment.
Terrific, thank you. Kathryn Allen, same question, 90 seconds.
Well, to answer your question, yes, I do think that the carbon industry contributes to global warming, and I personally have solar on my home, and I drive a hybrid vehicle. I recently attended our environmental caucus of the Democratic Party, where they discussed carbon fees and dividends. It's a subject I need to know more about, and I probably will call Joel Briscoe and talk to him about it. But I, like Ben, favor clean energy, and I'd like to see clean energy industries brought to rural areas. I know it's been done on at least one Navajo reservation, where the entire reservation became a solar panel manufacturer, and the entire reservation actually runs on solar power. So I like to see those kind of innovations. As far as coal itself is concerned, there may be other ways to use coal besides energy. It's the energy production that creates the environmental problem. There's a new substance called graphene, for instance, that could be big because it is just as strong as steel, but very, very light. So if that industry takes off, that might be another way to use coal.
Okay, and Carl Ingwell, 90 seconds.
So, first of all, I will unequivocally state that I do believe that burning fossil fuels contributes to climate change. I think that climate change is one of the biggest threats that facing Utah right now. What I would like to see is a diversification of local economies that would include moving to alternative energy production, among other things. That being said, I would never want to see hardworking coal miners or hardworking folks in the oil and gas industry put out of business because we need to move in a certain direction. What we need is a seamless path from burning fossil fuels to alternative energy. And if one person, one hardworking person, gets put out of a job and can't feed their family, that is a loss in Carbon County.
For your 30-second rebuttal, each of you seems to be in line with the others. So how will you discuss clean energy solutions with climate change deniers? There are plenty of them in Congress, and I will give that to Ben. Frank, first, 30 seconds.
So I won't be discussing it as a climate issue, because yes, it is a climate issue, but beyond that, it's an economic issue. It's a jobs issue. And right now, coal jobs are not sustainable because people have found that there are cheaper sources of energy. And so the way that I would discuss that is by saying that these jobs can exist that are safer, that are healthier, that can be longer lasting and just as well of paying, and there's better job security because wind and solar is on its way up where coal's on its way out.
Thank you. Kathy Allen, 30 seconds.
I think that you ask about how to convince climate deniers, and this is a problem that I think about every day. In fact, I liken it to some of my patients when I tell them they have a chronic disease and they don't want to deal with it, that if you can't acknowledge a problem first, there's no way to fix it. And I think that there is this immense amount of denial going around in Congress about all kinds of problems. There's fact resistance. The facts don't cross the blood-brain barrier. I don't know how to fix it except to give very concrete examples. Like, for instance, with clean energy.
Time,
okay.
You can come back to it in your closing statement if you choose. Carl Ingwell, 30 seconds.
So I think I'm along the same lines as Ben here. I think that coal starts to become an economic issue. And a lot of coal jobs follow the boom and bust cycle that a lot of different fossil fuel jobs follow. I grew up in the Uinta Basin. My dad works in oil and gas. So what we need to do, what we need to notice and talk about is that